Hey friends, Dean here with some exciting news to share. You can now buy us a coffee. That's right. You can help support independent content creators like us by becoming a member of the 3324 Green Room at buymeacoffee.com/3324. Our episodes will always be free and that will not change, but your support at buymeacoffee.com/3324 will help us continue to bring you the best in music and movie podcasting, in our humble opinion. As a Green Room supporter, you'll not only have our undying gratitude, but you'll also be able to vote on which episodes we record and receive other perks for as low as $3 per month. That's the price of a cup of coffee. There's absolutely no obligation, and nothing about the show will change. It's not going behind a paywall. Go to buymeacoffee.com/3324 for all the details. The link will be in the show notes of every episode as well. We'll see you in the Green Room. David Bowie has charted well, we have to do this over again. See that? It's already a tongue twister. David Bowie has charted an eclectic. Okay, I left out a word on my thing. Okay. We're leaving all this in, by the way. Here we go. David Bowie has charted an eclectic career through music history by assuming many alter egos. In this episode, we're catching up with the rise and fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. Stay with us.
Get ready for the 3324 podcast, where lifelong friends Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber share their love of all things music and movies. Dean has directed short films and is a music trivia buff. And Eric, trained in audio engineering, brings his extensive knowledge of music and film to the conversation as they discuss, debate, and celebrate their favorite albums, films, and much more.
Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast. Mistakes notwithstanding, don't hold that against us. We leave it in, Eric, right? We leave it in.
That's right. Yeah. We just like to have some fun, very off the cuff. This is, we're not, well, I like to say we're
too often. Usually those opens are, I have them.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I did is I changed it I just changed it like 2 minutes ago and I left out a word. I totally killed that just, if you're trying to read something and then you're missing a word and
it's fine.
What the word was,
fine. I mean, we like to be professional, but I guess we're not.
But not too.
Not that professional.
Just professional enough.
Yeah.
Just professional enough to kind of peek over the fence of professionality.
There you go. Yeah.
And if it's your first time here, don't let that get in the way. There are so many other episodes where my opening reads are perfect. So go check those out and then judge this one. And you can see, you give us a pass, give us a mulligan. It's a golf term. But thank you for joining us on this episode. Like I said, if you're first time here, there's close to 200 episodes in the back room. Go check them out. It's free to browse. See what you like. Make sure you follow us, though. So this way, when new episodes come out, you get a notification on your favorite podcast provider, a little ding, a little bell, a little green dot, whatever it is. That lets you know that a new episode is hot and ready waiting for you. So, wow. We've got a guest.
We do have.
We've got a new guest also.
Brand new.
hot off the presses, Mr. Neil Laird. Welcome aboard, Neil. How are you?
I'm fine. I haven't been brand new in a long time, so thank you for that intro. I really appreciate it.
How does that feel?
We thought we'd had to throw you
for the starshine.
Neil does a lot of different things. He's got his hand in a lot of different cookie jars. So instead of me trying to go through, let me kick it over to you, Neil. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know the one thing I can say is when we first communicated, we didn't connect right away because you were writing. So can you start there and tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I am a TV producer and novelist. And I think as we talked, I was just heading off to Turkey to write my latest novel, which is about ancient Troy. I love ancient Egypt. There's a lot of passion. Bowie is one of them, but ancient Egypt is very much another. So I'm writing a series of time travel books about a TV crew, of which I did for years and still do, National Geographic Discovery-like crew that gets sucked into the ancient past and to win an Emmy. So they go back to ancient Egypt or Pompeii or the Battle of Troy to see what they can get, if they can finally get those great ratings hits. So it's a very comedic sort of Neil Gaiman take on history. That's where I was. Wow. I was taken off to Turkey for a month near the ruins of Troy to write that book.
Cool. That's awesome. That is a great idea. That is wow.
Yeah, and you've got your own website, correct?
Correct, NeilLaird.com. And it's, that's where you can buy the book on Amazon. Prime Time Pompeii, the second one comes out, and it's right there on the tin. The film crew goes back to the eve of Pompeii to do a documentary, but of course they get the dates wrong, and rather than having 72 hours to get the hell out of Dodge, they got 24 hours. And as a documentary filmmaker, it's like I bring all the verisimilitude of history to it, which is essentially a romp. But I know the history of all these things. I am, as we get into Bowie, we'll talk. It's like I know all the facts and figures, and that's just in my brain as a TV producer. So I just took all that shit and turned it upside down and started writing novels about it.
That's it. You put it through the Neil Laird mixer, and you get Time Travel Adventures. We're going to drop a link.
Exactly. I scratched my head and say, "What the hell?"
Exactly.
That's awesome.
We're going to drop a link to your website in the show notes. This way, people can go directly click the link in the show notes and check out Neil's website. Check out what he's doing. He's got more stuff that he's working on. Like he said, he was in Turkey. Like that's putting in the sweat equity. That going to the locations, doing the research. I mean, that's really
it is. Boo-hoo. I mean, I was overlooking the Aegean Sea. Went for a swim.
Oh wow!
It was not going to a Turkish prison. Let's just say.
Okay. Neil didn't use AI to write his book. He actually does research. What a
he actually does the traveling to boot. On location.
Dinosaur, right?
He's awful. He does his own research. Oh man, come on.
Hey, do you do your own?
Giving us all a bad.
Do you do all your own stunts too? Neil?
I do, yeah.
There you go.
A lot. I look a lot.
So awesome. Thank you, Neil, for joining us. We're looking forward to this conversation. Like we said, before I get to the stats, I had just said before this, I think we've got, and Eric said it best, we have 3 tiers of Bowie knowledge. And even though we're meeting Neil for the first time, we're putting him in the top tier of expertise. And then Eric, I know, is kind of becoming a Bowie acolyte. He's been digging in.
Yeah.
And then me, I'm kind of, I'm of course aware of Bowie and aware of his music, but never did any deep dives. And that's one of the great things about this show. And what we do is, the stuff I know, that's the easy stuff. But then I get to also expose myself to stuff that I hadn't necessarily gotten into.
We can pull you into our little cult.
I'm kind of already getting it with this album. I'm kind of understanding. I'm kind of getting an understanding of the allure. One of those artists that I respected, but always kept at arm's length. With this album, let's get into the stats, and then we'll start the conversation.
Sure.
Because our listeners expect the statistical information before we get to the theories and all that crazy stuff. And we've got 3 truths and a lie later on in the episode, so we'll invite you to play along with us. We're going to put these 2 gentlemen's knowledge to the test to see if I can trick them with 3 truthful statements and 1 lie, and we'll see if they can pick out the lie. But here we go, the stats. The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars was released in June of 1972, produced by Ken Scott and David Bowie. All songs written by David Bowie, except for It Ain't Easy, which was written by Ron Davies. There were 2 singles released. Starman, backed with Suffragette City, hit number 19. Rock and Roll Suicide didn't chart in the U.S., but it was a UK hit, did well there. Only went to number 75 on Billboard, and that's another curious thing that we can talk about. But it was certified gold. It did sell over 500,000 copies, so that gives it gold status. Mr. Bowie was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1996 as well. So pretty early on, he was a pretty early on inductee. So that kind of also speaks to the gravitas and the mystery and the enigma. I think. Yeah. Neil, do you think enigmatic is an easy word to use to describe this gentleman?
I think it's the perfect one. Enigmatic, mysterious. Bowie has always been sort of one step ahead of the rest of us, and he made 27 albums, and except for a few dogs, almost all of them took people by surprise. And you said, where the hell did he come up with that? Because he always was enigmatic. Yeah. He's always trying to create new worlds with each album. And I think, you look back at his canon today, he's been dead for 8 years, and some of it still sounds so fresh and out there. You look at it and say, where did that come from? So enigmatic is a brilliant word to use.
So let me ask you, because you said that he was always kind of ahead of the curve. Do you think, in looking at his career, you can easily say that he embraced the internet, he embraced computer software, he was into technology way ahead, but some of those other choices, do you think they were just you think he was making those choices to be ahead of the curve, or because this is stuff that just interested him, and he's like, well, this is the direction I'm going in?
I mean,
Because I like it.
More the latter. Obviously, I didn't know the man personally, and if you read his interviews and talk about it, he was truly intellectual in terms of what he got into, books and music, and listening to art and world music and things that others. And he did. I mean, there definitely was some cynicism thrown towards him, even in the '70s during his heyday when he did his Berlin album, saying, "Oh, he's just jumping on the Kraftwerk bandwagon, or he's just doing the glam rock bandwagon." But anytime Bowie came along and appropriated another style, the Young Americans was the Plastic Philadelphia Soul album, he still made it Bowie. You listen to it today, and it doesn't sound like Luther Vandross who produced it. It sounds like David Bowie doing Luther Vandross. So even when he was appropriating what was out there, he was giving his own shape and his own style. And I think as the dust settles and you look back now and listen to his stuff, it's the Bowie you hear, not necessarily the context and where it was coming from. Each album is singularly Bowie.
Wow, it's an interesting thought, and we say that a lot on our show, where an artist will have so many different influences, and then they'll put it through their machine, and what comes out is something singularly their own. It sounds and it has echoes of other things, but it's only going to sound one way when each artist can hear the same five influences, but each thing will sound different. And you hit the nail right on the head.
We'll take a different direction.
Yeah. All right, let's get. What do you say, Eric? We get kicking on this? Or you have something
I like Dean. Bowie has always been on the musical sort of soundtrack of our lives. So I mean, we can't mistake. I mean, but everywhere you look. Every time you look up, he's there doing something else, a new face, a new suit, a new style, a new whatever. And I'm just, one of my biggest regrets is that I never appreciated what he was doing. I'm a big prog fan. You might know this by listening to some of our episodes. I'm a huge Peter Gabriel fan, Genesis fan. I know he's he was a big fan of Bowie. So you would think that I would like Bowie was doing all of that stuff. He was prog, he was art, he was this, he was that, he was jazz, he was soul. He was doing all of this, and I, wow, why is he not my favorite artist? Yeah. And it's only in recent years, and like you say, it's like eight years gone now. That's when it was after his death was when I started taking those dives and really, started digging into this stuff. And, not all the time, but I'm kind of been taking it in doses, and I've been watching a whole documentaries about it. Moon Age Daydream is a fantastic doc. The 5-year series that they had on HBO, I believe that, the different periods of his career were great. I was a huge fan of Black Star when it came out. It's
a dark and fascinating album. Yeah,
it is. What a way to go out. I have a nice little story. I'm a big Tedeschi Trucks fan. The bass player of the band at the time played on that record. He was in his acid jazz band. Bowie, in his last days, got the band together that worked on the next day. Started recording. I think they did Lazarus. I think they did Black Star. And then he went out to a club in true Bowie fashion with some friends, watched these guys play. He's saying, I want them on my album. Let's scrap what we're doing. Take them off. I want these guys to play on the album. And then, oh my God.
It was these
guys just take it to a whole new level. I mean, there's just the free form jazz aspect of it is just fantastic. And it's
the
just
way out there album, you listen to it, you couldn't imagine coming, and it's singular. And I imagine 20 years from now, it'll still sound singular because it's not like it came out of anything. He wasn't aping anything. And one of the great things about Bowie, for those of us who are diehard fans and for those who just kind of come in and out, perhaps like you guys, can understand why people don't stay, because just when you get comfortable with his Let's Dance, he's doing drum and bass, or he's going dark with or just when you get used to his Young Americans, he's going off to Berlin and he's doing these obscure kind of industrial stuff. So he never lets you kind of get comfortable into a groove. He doesn't let the audience get comfortable with where he gets, and he expects you to come along on the ride or not. And I think a lot of fans simply didn't often because they got into one persona but not the next. So he never
Right.
really
Yeah.
stayed at the top. He would come and go depending on what he was chasing. And I love that. I love the fact that I remember I first
So
got
do
into
I.
Bowie in the late
Yeah.
70s. I was 12 or 13. And it was that time between the Lodger, which was the last of his Berlin album, and Scary Monsters. The time just before he came out with Let's Dance and became very big. And I was fascinated by him because he was so odd and strange. And I grew up in a small Pennsylvania town, and it was all headbanging music. And I heard Bowie doing "Boys Keep Swinging," one of these strange songs on Saturday Night Live. I don't know if you've ever seen this. Have you guys ever seen him do the on Saturday Night Live, circa 1979? If you haven't, Google it after. It is the strangest performance because basically he's all puppets. It's his head over a sheet, and he's got these kind of
I
Yes.
think I've seen that.
Yes, I do remember that. Yes.
I have seen that. Yes.
Yep.
like,
Mhm.
wow, it's so freaking weird. It's like, who the hell is this guy? We was talking about enigmatic. There is enigmatic, and he was doing the song. So I chased him, and then the album I got afterwards, I didn't know what the hell I was getting. I couldn't wait to race home and put it on my turntable and listen to it because I knew it was going to take me somewhere else. It was going to challenge me in a new way. And I was very much into the punk stuff in the 70s and the 80s and the industrial sound. I really got into all that stuff. And so I was very much the early mid 80s punker rock and then the all the alternative stuff. But Bowie was still one of those canon artists that I still would take a chance on. That was his weak years too. I'd still buy him and listen. I would always hear the Bowie groove, even if he was a bit wayward.
Yeah.
Well, and that's one of the things about those artists. And when you were saying all that, Neil, and we've talked about this on other episodes too with Eric. Eric is Bob Dylan, the same I don't give a shit attitude, meaning I'm doing what I want, and if you like it, come along. Now, Bowie is definitely swings wider on that pendulum because he's very experimental and very into just kind of following where he goes. But then I guess that makes it exciting for if you already started following the artist and you know that after a couple of albums that's the way it is, there's got to be some excitement because he's already by the time we catch up with him here, I think this album, if I'm saying it correctly, kind of starts to set the pace for it, right? Because the stuff before this was kind of he wasn't even like the albums before this weren't really even charting in the UK. He was kind of an artist, and he had Space Oddity and a couple of other songs, but hadn't figured out, I think, what the Bowie for.
Bowie yet, exactly. I mean, Hunky Dory is a brilliant album, and Man Who Sold the World is really good.
I think so.
Those albums didn't break through, except for maybe Changes and a few singles like that. But then Ziggy Stardust came out in 72. And again, it was before my time. I was only 5 at the time, so I got it all retro as well. We talked to people who were there. They almost say it came down to one performance, one night, where Ziggy came out in early 72, and it was bubbling under and got some really good reviews. And then he went Top of the Pops in the UK, and he played Starman, all in drag. And, Mick Ronson's there.
I watched that today.
And it is like you hear people say their lives changed that night because no one had ever dressed like that, no one had ever done that stuff. And it was this wonderful, catchy little tune that apparently he wrote at the last moment because they needed a hit for the album. But it is just, you look at it today and you really can't believe it kind of got away with it because the sexual bending he did, it was 7 people. And it was also just, the glam rock scene was kind of fun and it was still very retro, but he took it and he made it his own theatrical thing. It's very theatrical, Bowie. And I think that's what drags people in is he loves the theater as much as he loves the song. And
and I think this was and I think the whole Ziggy concept was a bold move because if you look at Hunky Dory and the albums before, he was kind of in the hippie aesthetic. He had long hair. And I think he had even said that this was an attempt to kind of cut away from that and saying, you know what, the hippie stuff is over. It's time for something new, something daring, even for him. Because like I said, like we think of David Bowie and we think he was always this way. And he actually wasn't. It was kind of this album really kind of started that whole taking on, the whole different personas and really feeling emboldened, right? Neil, to take those chances.
He was doing that before then, just not with any great success. Because Man Who Sold the World is a heavy metal album, 1970. It is crunchy, loud guitar. And then Hunky Dory, there's a song called Song for Bob Dylan on it. And it's very folksy. The stuff he did in the 60s was really pretty ropey, like it was very sort of drippy, sort of, Anthony Dooley stuff at times. So he was finding his voice. And then he came along.
Yeah, decidedly more folk, like this, the earlier stuff. I mean, when Space Oddity came out, which that song always blew me away. And it just, but you've listened to the rest of the album and it's like, it's really not like that song at all.
It didn't get much my turntable. It starts with, I say Hunky Dory is his other masterpiece in 71.
Yes.
Just before it. But from then he was off and running. And then remember, even Ziggy, he did Ziggy in the follow-up Aladdin Sane in 73, which had big hits like Gene Genie and things like that. And then by 74 with Diamond Dogs, he was already getting tired of the Ziggy persona. And then he shook everybody up in 75 by going to Philadelphia and cutting this, what he called his Plastic Soul album, Young Americans. And Fame. Fame was his biggest hit. But it was a total departure. A lot of people were pissed off. It was this glam rocker who was hanging out with, a bunch of R&B singers, this skinny, drugged, addled white guy.
Yeah, he was rail thin at that point too. If you see interviews at that point, he was in bad shape. It's a blessing that he made it through the 70s. We talk about a lot of rock and roll casualties, but I think this album is the album that kind of gave him that freedom, I think, that it's okay to do different things and to subvert expectations, right? Because I think he was kind of trying to find his niche, but I think his niche is no niche, right?
Well, he's the great imitator. He's a great persona he comes across, and you said he sort of, I won't say mimics things because he brings his own style, but he was trying to find his own voice. Though I don't think it's fair to say that this was the one that he finally found himself. I think the reason we're still talking about Ziggy, 50 odd years later, because it's a fucking amazing album. There's not a bad note on that album. And if you listen to it, it was 8 or 10 songs. They're all brilliant. You probably know most of them, even not a Bowie fan, because they've been around. Yeah. Trailers will put them in. Moon Age Daydream appears everywhere, and adverts for milk. Right. He's everywhere. The album is brilliant. And the other album, getting there, he was finding that voice, but Ziggy's, the persona and how he dressed and how he looked and his Top of the Pop performance certainly made him stand out. But what gave him lasting power is the album is just seminally brilliant. It is, to me, it is the gateway drug for Bowie. If you're interested in Bowie, that's how the first one I got into. I'd heard the other stuff, but I heard Ziggy, and that's the album that pulled me into his universe. Because again, already a false note on the album. It's catchy as hell. It's fun. It ages well. They're short, punchy songs. No songs more than 3.5, 4 minutes long. They're all just fit for parties. You could needle drop any of them a party, and people would start singing. It is just a seminal album,
and it's an amazing, amazing achievement because it's also a concept album. Which, and by and large, concept albums are typically associated with 10-minute, 15-minute musical, musical cues and all this kind of like heavy concepts. The concept is actually each song represents something different in the trajectory of this character of Ziggy, who's this alien, of course, me being that's kind of where I started. Was with Rush 2112. I mean, I that was all my first albums that I ever listened to as a kid were all concept albums. They all told a story of some sort.
However, you probably can follow the narrative very well, just like 2112. I would say it's rather murky. In an elevator pitch for those albums, you probably couldn't explain what the album is about. Narrative.
Right, exactly. I mean, but this album I had, until much, much later, I didn't even have any idea that it was telling a specific story. I just figured this was just a persona he was doing at the time, and this was a character, but I didn't realize that it actually did tell. There is a narrative to this thing. So
you asked him what it's about, and because he died. The last song is "Rock and Roll Suicide," which is a wonderful court song. Does that mean he kills himself at the end? I mean, there's a lot of questions in terms of how solid that narrative is. But you're right, concept in terms of it's about what creates a character. What Bowie did is he create characters. The Ziggy character, then he created the Thin White Duke for Station to Station, and then he just loved those ideas of just kind of playing somebody outside himself. He always claimed that he thought David Robert Jones was very dull, so he had to become Ziggy Stardust. He had to become Screaming Lord Byron and on Blue Jean. He had to become the Buttonhole Man on Black Star. He always liked to
Yeah.
get into a character because David Bowie himself wasn't interesting enough in his eyes.
Yeah,
Well, there's I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dean.
yeah, no, and I think that's an interesting, not career trajectory, but it's an interesting way to develop your musical career. And I wrote this in my notes that for him, the image and the characters he would create, even if there was just costumes, was a part of the music. Like like you said, it kind of facilitated and got him into different headspaces, perhaps.
Yeah.
Very different than the Beatles dressing up like Sgt. Pepper, which was more of a costume thing.
Just having
With
a laugh.
Bowie, exactly. This was more of this helped him to develop the music and follow where his muse was going. And if it meant aping, Southern Philly, 60s music or soul, he would kind of tend to dress, his hair would change to that, right? You have a little bit of a pompadour and he would kind of morph like a chameleon into, as he was absorbing these different things. And it's very interesting that the image for Bowie helped support what he was doing. It helped him kind of get into the mind space, right?
Yeah, and exactly the mood that if you look at, again, Thin White Duke, for example, was a slick back hairdo he did in the mid 70s for Station to Station and Into the Berlin. It was very icy and cold and European and distant, and he really he almost pantomime, and the music became more distant and it became more, just more inhuman in a way. And he was anticipating the rise of that electronic music, but also sort of like a European. The line of Station to Station that goes over and over, the European canon is here. And it's all about kind of playing that role. It may not mean anything in terms of character, but I think it helps him perform the songs the way he wants to. When he came out with Let's Dance, it was sort of the Frank Sinatra thing, with the suit and the tie and the yellow hair. And it was this Vegas performer that came, which works brilliantly when you're doing Let's Dance or you're doing Modern Love, because it's all about this sense of just balloons and spectacle.
Very much the actor, right? I mean, very method in his approach to. Interestingly enough, I just watched an interview with him today, basically saying how he describes Ziggy and the music. That the music is actually, it's the image first. It is okay. So I got this character, I got this image, but now what am I going to, how am I going to play this image up? Okay, he's an alien, he's this, but he injected a little bit of kabuki theater into the thing, miming, all of these things. Before he even started talking about the music, he was talking about how he was portraying and personifying this character with the makeup and all this kind of thing. And then the music was decidedly what he called very fringe New York music at the time, very Lou Reed, Velvet Underground, which was what he was channeling. At that point, and which is interesting because I'm thinking about Almost Famous, right? When the character's talking to Philip Seymour Hoffman, and he's like, "Oh, are you a Bowie fan?" He's like, "Nah, I dig him, but he's trying to be Lou Reed. So if Reed's doing Bowie, then Bowie's doing Reed, and that whole shtick right there. I mean, but it's true. It's like you kind of get that vibe. He's actually channeling that music, but like we said before, making it his own.
Yeah.
And it's because of those, that other stuff that he incorporates into it that just, really kind of lifts it to a whole new level.
Yeah, he was definitely inspired by his contemporaries.
Yeah.
Like Lou Reed figures heavily, Iggy Pop, which a lot of people thought the Ziggy came from, but it was actually, he said it wasn't. He said Ziggy was, what was he, a shoemaker or something in London or something? There was some shop. It was Ziggy. And he said, I like that. I like it. And it's okay if people think it came from Iggy Pop, but there was some shop owner. His name was Ziggy, and he took it. So let's start talking about this. What's that? Yeah. So let's start talking about this album. Like you said, Neil, this album moves quickly, which is nice. And you put it perfectly, because for me, this was really the first one I listened to as a gateway, right? So, and we always like to give our listeners like something, a place to start. And I think this is a great one to start with.
Yeah. A lot of people discovered him.
For you, where does it rate for you, Neil?
Pardon?
On your listing, like when you're going to go grab a Bowie album, where does this one fit in for you? Is this a first grab?
I would say, yeah, it's up there in the top. I think it's obviously it was my gateway because it's the album that I just became enamored of him. I'm a huge fan of Low as well. It's 1977 album, and actually some of his later stuff. I'm one of those people that that stuck with him, and it was so great to see him return. And I think that Heathen and Black Star are two brilliant albums too. Two of his last albums. You listen to Heathens, another great album, which it was a big hit when it came out in 2002, but then I think it got eclipsed by Next Day, which was also wonderful. And then Black Star, there's not a bad song on that album. It's so well crafted. And what's very interesting about that album is later Bowie, and he's just playing himself. It's the first time he kind of took the makeup on. He's playing the statesman, and that's the role he plays. But the songs are so beautifully crafted, and it harkens back to the classic Bowie that I think those are my favorites.
Yeah, but what I didn't know about Bowie is that he actually plays acoustic guitar pretty well. He said he was never good enough to be a lead guitarist, but there's a lot of acoustic guitar work on this by David Bowie, which kind of and he also he learned saxophone as a young child. I think when he was 12, he took sax lessons. He plays, I think, up to 16 different instruments. So he's one of those auteurs also. So, there are some artists that the image is everything, and then there's not a lot behind it. I think Bowie is one of those ones where he was already an artist, but he realized that the image would help, right? Because he already had the goods. He didn't say, well, I need an image first, and then I'll figure it out. He had it figured out. He just needed to work with the whole imaging thing because he had the goods already to create songs, to write songs, to collaborate, to know his way around the studio. And in this album, you really see it. And I think we need to kind of stop for a moment and shout out his supporting group, the Spiders. Right. Because again, this is kind of a group effort. These guys really helped him bring this vision, audio vision to light. And it was, let's see, I have it written down. There we go. The Spiders are Mick Ronson on guitar, Trevor Boulder on bass, and then Mick Woodmansey on drums. And they had worked with Bowie previously. Rick Wakeman had done some work from Yes before he joined Yes. He had done a lot of work with Bowie, and then he exited, and that gave them an opportunity to kind of really have a guitar forward album, which this really was.
A crunchy guitar album.
Yeah,
Bowie often was his best, I think, when he was most guitar driven. If you listen to the albums, they really kind of pop. When they bring Robert Fripp on Scary Monsters, when they bring the Tin Machine albums, it is all just crunchy, loud guitar. And I think he's at his happiest when there's just loud guitars. And this album is very much driven by that classic rock and roll sensibility. It is it's driven by guitar.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that also kind of gives you, if you have someone that you've been working with like Rick Wakeman and he decides, well, I'm going to do other things, you're almost kind of forced to either get another keyboard player or you soldier on and say, well, this is an opportunity to do something different, right? It's an opportunity for a change that maybe was forced on us and wasn't so natural, but then let's see what we can do with it. And with the Spiders, this is a 4-piece band and this is just a straight ahead, like you said, Neil, straight ahead rock.
Yeah. It doesn't have some of the songs are beautifully crafted and super catchy, but if you listen again, some of his later stuff, it becomes more layered. And particularly Eno was a big thing with that. Yeah, some of his albums just had 16 different layers, and Eno didn't do this, and I love his Eno stuff, but it's direct. It is rock and roll album. And I think that's why it's so accessible today, and it's why it's aged so well, because rock ages much better than electronica or drum and bass or some of those things that have a timestamp on it.
Yeah, which again, the short songs, the rock element to it, it is, but yet still a concept. You would think that there would be strings or, a heavy sort of, lush production aspect to this, especially when it comes to the concept of what it's about. But yeah, that's not there. And decidedly, though, interestingly enough, that the acoustic guitar kind of lends a different. It's not just merely strumming, right? It acts. The acoustic guitar in this album, it adds that a thin layer of something. It gives it something. I don't know what it is. I can't describe it, but there's like a veil of like just sort of.
Yeah, it sort of echoes a bit, and it's in your face up here, as opposed to often the music. The voice is up front and the guitars. Like if you listen to Lady Stardust, for example, which is a
Oh,
slower
beautiful.
and
Yeah.
more of a ballad song. And it starts with an acoustic guitar, but the acoustic guitar is still in your face. It starts slow, but then it's like right there. It's mixed very loudly. So
Yeah.
that is very much heralding, I think, the direction.
Somebody pointed out, I don't know where I read it, but somebody pointed out that the acoustic guitar it's almost like a percussion instrument, adding a level of rhythm to it, almost like a very high end, like a hi-hat on a drum kit. Yeah. And I kind of understand what that means. Like it does not sound like a drum or like that, but I understand the tone, the tonality, and where its place is in the production. Like you pointed out, very upfront with the vocal, and that's just love the production on this record.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it's such an easy listen, is because it is well balanced. Like Neil said, you can this isn't like a test for your ears. Some of the early 70s recordings really suffer from poor production, and it makes it a chore to like listen to some stuff sometimes.
You're right.
But this is just so well produced, and like I said, the acoustic guitars are there. But then when it's time to get rocking, that is front and center.
What song, if you listen to Soul Loves has a bongo with some beautiful Stars Life and Snow. But once again, the guitar kicks in the middle and takes over. And I love it when it's interesting. This next album was still on the Ziggy persona, was Aladdin Sane. And they're using a lot more piano into it and strings into it, Lady Grinning Soul and all these torch songs. So I think even then he was reinventing himself, even within the Ziggy persona. He was already testing himself a year later. And then he dropped it off.
And I think the thing that also makes this album a great classic among classics also is its consistency. Also, as a concept album, you don't have the 20-minute suites with different movements and everything gets all different. It's like, this is, like Eric said, it's a concept album, but it's a straight ahead rock album that you can skip the story. If you don't, if you're not interested in that, that's fine. This is an album that can exist outside of that as just music. Like, if that ain't
incidental at best, I think.
Exactly. If the story's not your gig, you don't have to. You can take each song like 5 years. It is just a great album opener. It just really kind of kicks things off. And like you said, Soul Love, and then you get the classics. Moon Age Daydream, Starman is on here. Ziggy Stardust, Suffragette City. I mean, there's no lacking of classic tracks for somebody who's new to Bowie or wants to find the album to try and dive in with. I think this is the one, Neil.
I would agree. It certainly was for me, and that was long before the other albums came out.
Yeah.
Some albums, some of my other favorite albums, like I said, Outside is a wonderful album, another concept album, 85. But that one is so dense, and it has a narrative that is so sort of tangled and strange. And it was his big reunion with Brian Eno in 95. And there's some wonderfully weird, wonderful songs in there. But it is a listen. You have to be listened for that album. You have to want to go on that journey. A lot of people didn't, I think. Where Ziggy doesn't demand that same kind of commitment. It is
it's a pick up and play.
But you don't mind listening to the entire record, though, right? You don't want to just listen. You don't want to skip over any tracks, because I don't think there is a track that
Ziggy. No, I don't think it's a bad song.
No,
I think
it's very
cover. It Ain't Easy, which I could take or leave. And if you listen to ones that were left off, like Velvet Goldmine was a wonderful song that he did, very strange, and that was taken off at the last minute for It Ain't Easy. I don't know why. And that's of course the title of the film that was loosely based on him in the 90s by Todd Haynes. It's a wonderfully quirky. It would have been perfect on the album, but I think I won't call it a weak song, but the one song that I was like doesn't feel up to scratch is a cover. Bowie was notoriously bad at covers.
That's what I heard. Yeah.
I guess after 27 albums and having all his albums, you could tell the covers never actually, they always sounded weaker and knocked off, or they didn't sound Bowie-esque. The only time that he owned a cover and made it arguably even better than the original, that's hard to say because it was a Nina Simone song, was Wild as the Wind, which is a song off of Station to Station at 76. If you haven't heard it, go listen to it afterwards, because this is beautiful. It's just his voice rises, and again, it's an old Nina Simone song he just takes and makes his own with the Bowie croon, and it gives you chills. But that's one of the few times that I think he nailed a cover. his covers are always fall flat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And an interesting kind of bit of kismet. Around this time, he was a big Mott the Hoople fan. And they were on the verge of breaking up. And he said, I'm going to give you a song. I'll give you guys a song if you don't break up. And the song is Suffragette City. And Mott the Hoople didn't want that. They're like, nah, not really for us, which is odd.
A bit snobby.
Yeah. Instead, they got all the young dudes, which became a, but you know what, Neil, let's say that Mott the Hoople took Suffragette City. All the young dudes a Bowie version of All the Young Dudes could easily fit in its place.
I mean, I talked to friends who are more casual Bowie listeners, and they think that All the Young Dudes is a Bowie song.
Yeah.
Because it's just so Bowie-esque. It's just so Bowie-esque.
Yeah.
Bowie's all the way through it. It's that glam rock classic. He reappropriated it, and he played it even, I think, in his last tour, the reality tour. He was still doing it in 06 or whatever. So, 03.
Yeah.
So he obviously reclaimed that song as his own. But yeah, it's like, it clearly is a Bowie song that he gave to somebody else.
Yeah.
But when he did it, it didn't sound anything like what they did with it.
Exactly.
Of course not.
Of course he's going to change it, right? So yeah, he's going to make it as different as possible, right? So yeah.
So Neil, if let's say you had to convince somebody, let's say you're talking to somebody about Bowie, and they're like, okay, and you zero in on this album, you're like, okay, this is the album I want you to listen to. What 2 or 3 songs would you point them in the direction of outside of the hits, right? We know, okay, they're going to know Suffragette City. They're going to know Starman, maybe or maybe not. Those are kind of, Mid-Age Daydream, a little bit more of a minor hit. But what would you point them to on this album? To what's emblematic or what represents
in his canon on this album?
This album. So if you're trying to get somebody to listen to this album, say, listen, you got to check these 2 or 3 songs out.
I mean, I think Lady Stardust is a beautiful ballad. I always like his more operatic ones. The last song is Rock and Roll Suicide is just beautiful. It's almost Judy Garland at the end, the way it just kind of becomes this torch song. Moon-Age Daydream is such a classic. It's just so odd, and it's so, I'm an alligator, I'm a mama papa coming for you. The lines are so freaking out there that it's such a time capsule of the early 70s that I think that's one that makes people laugh. So hit or not, I would put that on there.
Yeah.
I never cared as much for Suffragette City. I always thought Suffragette City was too much of a straight ahead rocker, which bores me a little bit. So the ones like that, the later albums like Rebel and some of those, I find those songs a bit dull because they're not weird enough.
Yeah. See, a true Bowie fan, right? The passing Bowie fan would be like, yeah, I like that. It's kind of catchy. The real Bowie fan's like, no, you know what? No.
No. That's just the one for the masses.
And oddly enough, Moon-Age Daydream ended up, Eric, right? Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
It did. In the Marvel film Guardians of the Galaxy, they used Moon-Age Daydream.
30 seconds, but it was there.
Oh, yeah. It shows that just...
Hear it. Yeah, I remember my trainer at the gym one time came and said, you got to hear this song. And he played that because he got this. Dude, I heard this first in 1972.
And that's the great thing about some of these needle drop, nowadays with the movies, and they're using some of these older songs. People are going out and finding them or thinking that it's a new song, right? They're like, oh, you got to hear this Moon-Age Daydream. It's like, well, yeah, it's been around, but I think that's kind of the good thing when some of these types of songs get used in movies, because it's very easy to pick out a hit Bowie song, but something a couple of layers under the surface.
As a Bowie fan, I had great mixed reaction to 1994 or whatever, 93, when Nirvana covered Man Who Sold the World. Mm-hmm. And at that point, Bowie was kind of on the outs. He had just done a 30-week album called Black Tie, White Noise, and he was no longer among the cool kids. But if you recall, that was on their what do you call it?
Live.
Whatever
Unplugged.
it was.
On TV Unplugged, yeah.
Whatever it's called. And it was their single. It was just before he died, just before Kurt Cobain died. And everyone just loved that new Nirvana song. And they'd come and say, have you heard this song? We did in 1970. Oh, I never heard that. I had no idea. It's still considered today a Nirvana song. So why it's great that it's been rediscovered from the ashes by another band. It's frustrating to be kind of these emotionally, connected fans. It's like, It's not him. It was already
Yeah.
14 years old when he did it. You know, all
Tell
this
us about it. Yeah, we've been through that with all the bands that we
But,
love.
but you know what?
You
I
know,
think but it's also shows a little respect, right? It shows that these
yes,
Nirvana, it shows the roots, and they're showing respect and saying, you know what, new kid, you know what, young kids who are fans of us, here's something that influenced us, and it may you may not connect to it right now, but let's give you a version of it.
And it's so cool because Nirvana was the biggest band at the time,
Yeah.
and they remember this obscure Bowie song that was never really a hit. But if you listen to it, it's a wonderful song, and they brought it back to life. And then Bowie kept performing it after then. It became sort of part of his vlog after that because people remember this. So it was great to see those when those songs are kind of rediscovered, whether it's in a trailer for a movie, or I know Starman was used in The Martian, and a lot of these other things. I mean, it's fascinating. Under Pressure, what a huge song that is. It's such because they just won a poll with the greatest duet ever. And I remember when that came out in '81, and it was a knockoff song they did with Queen because they were
it came and went. Yeah, we've talked about that in the past.
And Andy Knight did it, I think, drunk in Switzerland or whatever, doing something else. It was just a knockoff song, and now it is this song that everyone knows. It's played in like spin classes around the world.
I think I think Bowie got his due in his time. I think by the time he was, by the time he passed away, people had kind of when they looked back at the career and they saw how eclectic it was, and they saw what a singular artist he was, and he did things his own way. I think people kind of respected that. With Freddie Mercury on Under Pressure, like he died so young that people he's been gone 30 something years. And Under Pressure is looked at as this iconic performance, which it is between those two. At the time, like I said, it was a throwaway song. We're like, oh yeah, okay, yeah.
Nice little number.
But now it's like
Queen put it on an album, but Bowie didn't do it. It's just kind of something he did in between albums. So the fact, you never know what's going to last. And I hope that's true about Bowie because, again, I'm one of those diehard Bowie fans that absolutely adores a lot of his 90s stuff, which is very easily forgotten. And I hope people rediscover that because he suffered so many slings and arrows after he did Never Let Me Down and Tonight, two pretty weak pop albums in the late 80s. And then Tin Machine wasn't particularly well endeared by critics because it was just loud rock.
Yeah.
So he never quite got his mojo back for a long time, but he was making wonderful albums like Earthling, like the drum and bass album, and Heathen was a big return. But still, some of the songs on those albums, Absolute Beginners is one of the best songs of the 80s, and they're kind of forgotten. If you look at people's top 10 Bowie songs, they're almost all 70s. They go up to 83. And I'm always frustrated being that the fully committed Bowie fans say, "Oh, you got to hear his his stuff." Like anybody, like any geek that freaks out on any band or whatever. And there's just some wonderful stuff that he was doing, and fearlessly so. I mean, to go back, I think one of the reasons that I wrote that book when I did, I'm 58 in a month or two, and I have a TV producer for 25 years, and I always wanted to write a novel. And I remember talking about it. I was drunk at the pubs with my friends and such, and I had a few ideas. And I started writing it in 2016. And two things happened in 2016 that made me get off the pot and do it. One is I turned 50 and realized, well, holy shit, Neil, you ain't the spring chicken anymore. And then Bowie died in January of 16. And of course, no one is preparing for that. And as much as I know Bowie's work, when I read his obituaries, it just reminded me how fearless the man was, how he was not afraid to try and fail and reinvent himself and abandon his audience and go after something else. Almost 30 times he did this. And I remember thinking, if Bowie could do it 30 times, I can freaking do it once. I got one book in me. And again, it was the inspiration of him just not being afraid to go out there and try things, and hopefully people will catch on later on.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said earlier, he's very intellectual. I could watch interviews with him forever because just the way he speaks, he just he knows what he's talking about. He's not one of those people that kind of give you the BS. It's like when he does an interview and he gets asked a question, he answers it. And it might be a 3 or 4 minute answer, but he's going to give you the whole thing. So yeah, he's more than just a rock star because he's also an actor and did so
I loved everything he did.
Yeah,
as far as
there
an
were
actor. Every
so many
movie he
different
was
things.
ever in, he was riveting. And
You ever see that? I think it's from the UK version of The Office. You ever see that clip? It's on YouTube, Eric, where he's talking to Ricky Gervais and he starts writing a song about him being fat and disgusted and he's like, no, that's not right. And then he enhances the lyric to make it even worse. And Ricky Gervais is like, no, that's okay. And everyone starts laughing. And then he just keeps making the song more and more like horrible, but it's such a great comedic. Just like and he played it totally straight, So he was not afraid to make fun of himself and not afraid to look back on that stuff and not take it so seriously. And I think that's part of the freedom that Neil, you talked about, is not being afraid to fail. If you take it so seriously, you're going to labor over every decision.
Or
and he's
you
like,
dwell
nah.
on it, and then you get caught up and well, I should have done that to go back and try that again. He just moved on.
Yeah. All right. Before we wind things up, and we'll talk about our favorite tracks towards the end. It's time for 3 truths and a lie. Normally we do 3 lies and a truth, but again, the truth about David Bowie is so much more interesting than me trying to make stuff up about him, that I have 4 statements that we're going to put these gentlemen to the test on. 3 of these statements are absolutely true. One of them is false. Okay. So I'm going to go to Eric first because I'm leaving the expert for the end because I don't want him to taint Eric's answers, because I think I can snag Eric with one. I'm not too sure about Neil. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the 4 statements. Eric will let me know what he thinks is the false statement. You at home, if you're playing, same thing. We're going to go through the statements. Let us know on social media, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, what your choices were or choice was. And then we'll turn it over to Neil and see if I could stump Neil. I'm not sure. But
I'm game. You might be able to.
Okay, so here we go. So Eric first, I'm going to read. These are going to be both the same 4 statements for both of you. So you're both going to be picking from the same crop. So here we go. 3 of these are true. 1 is false. Statement number 1. In David Bowie's group Tin Machine, members Tony and Hunt Sales are the sons of comedian Soupy Sales. Statement number 2. David Bowie's son, Zoe Bowie, is actually film director Duncan Jones. Statement number 3. David Bowie was approached by Marvel Comics for the role of the Ancient One in 2016's Doctor Strange, but was already too ill to consider the project. Final statement. Bowie's real name is David Jones, and he changed it to Bowie to stop confusion with the Monkees' Davy Jones. You want those 4 again, Eric?
No.
Okay. So 3 of those are true. 1 of those is a lie. Which one is the lie? Which one's made out of whole cloth?
The lie is C.
C.
I'm going to go with C.
Bowie was approached by Marvel for the role of the Ancient One in 2016's Doctor Strange, but was already too ill to consider the project. You're saying that's fake.
That's fake.
That's a lie. All right. So you're going with C. Neil, do you want me to read those? Do you want me to read those again, or you have it?
Do I know the answer too? Yeah. And I concur.
Yeah? Okay. So
concur with your colleague.
So you're saying C was false. That he was approached by.
Yeah.
I know the truth. I know the truth of this.
You know the truth. Well, you know the lie. You know the lie.
I know the lie, but in this case, I know what. Go ahead.
All right. Everybody at home, make sure you lock in your answer. Make sure you let us know which one of these 4 statements. I'm going to read them again for the people at home, just because normally we give it a couple times. In David Bowie's group Tin Machine, members Tony and Hunt Sales are the sons of comedian Soupy Sales. Number 2, David Bowie's son, Zoe Bowie, is actually film director Duncan Jones. He did that film Moon, and he did Warcraft. Another possible statement was approached by Marvel for the role of the Ancient One in 2016's Doctor Strange, but was already too ill to consider the project. And the final statement, Bowie's real name is David Jones, and he changed it to Bowie to stop confusion with the Monkees' Davy Jones, who was popular at the time. Those are your 4 statements at home. Make sure you lock in your answer. Here we go. Okay. We're going to go with the true statements first, and we'll circle around the false one, and we'll see if they got it. Okay, Bowie's real name is David Jones, and he did change it to Bowie to stop confusion with the Monkees' Davy Jones. That's a true statement. Well-known fact, Davy Jones of the Monkees was also English, but he was very popular at the time of the Monkees, and if you're born David Jones, that's going to be a tough nut to crack in the 60s.
There's a lot of David Jones out there already, probably.
Yeah. Seems like this is a problem I don't need. The Bowie came from Jim Bowie, the creator of the American Alamo hunting knife, the Bowie knife. That's where the Bowie came from, actually. Another true statement. Bowie's group Tin Machine. Members Tony and Hunt Sales, they are the sons of comedian Soupy Sales. They played drums and bass, and then Reeves Gabrels filled out Tin Machine on guitar with his very eclectic guitar work in Tin Machine. But yeah, Soupy Sales, people of a certain generation, namely ours.
People here listening to Soupy Sales is you are really reaching into the deep dark past.
Nah, you know what? That's our demographic. We got the Soupy Sales. We got the Soupy Sales people locked in.
There you go.
So yeah, his sons Hunt and Tony are musicians, and they played or with Tin Machine. So very interesting. Let's see. Do you want the final true statement, or you want the false statement? Which would you like, Eric? No, we'll leave it to Neil. You want me to tell the lie first?
I would tell let's tell the lie first, then we can wrap up.
Tell the lie first. Okay. We're going to give them the bell. These gentlemen were correct. I lied when I said he was approached by Marvel for the role of the Ancient One in 2016's Doctor Strange, but was already too ill to consider the project. Although that would have been interesting to have him in the MCU. Bowie, I probably might have been open to it. And then, yes, Bowie's son, Zowie Bowie, Zowie, is actually film director Duncan Jones, who has made a name for himself directing films and writing screenplays and doing all that. Another creative. But oddly enough,
the truth to that statement is he was approached by Denis Villeneuve to play Wallace in the Blade Runner sequel.
Oh, see that? Well, that's where I got my idea.
Which went to Jared Leto.
Yeah.
But he wanted Bowie, and he was too sick to do it.
You know what other big franchise he said no to before that?
What's that?
He was asked to be Gandalf.
Really?
Peter Jackson was interested in using him as Gandalf, and for whatever reason he chose no. I don't know if Bowie said yes or no, but he decided to go with that.
Well, Ian McKellen was made for Gandalf. I mean,
in a way, I'm kind of glad Bowie. I think to me, one of the worst things he ever did was one of his most popular things, which is Labyrinth.
Yeah.
And you talk to young girls half our age, they all know Bowie from Labyrinth. Yeah. And it's a piece of shit film. And it's some of his worst music. And it's like, I'm so glad, Bowie didn't do more Marvel music and Muppet
I love the film. My kids love it. They, they're I mean, it is what it is, man. It's creative, it's magic, but yeah, I get you, hey, it's an iconic role. I loved him in The Prestige when he showed up as
Tesla.
As Tesla, that blew me away. I was like, "Oh, that was totally unexpected,"
Or him playing Andy Warhol and Basquiat, or Pontius Pilate, Last Temptation.
Oh, right. And Last Temptation, yes, yep.
So he's done a wide array of movie work, and he's picked and chose. He was in The Hunger, he was in The Men Who Fell to Earth. So he's done his share of also being on the silver screen, besides being a very prolific musician. So thank you, gentlemen, for conquering me. You beat me at my own game. You found out the lie. It wasn't that hard. I mean, some of this stuff was probably,
well, it's like you say. I mean, the stuff is just so wacky. Like, of course they're the sons of Soupy Sales. Why not? You know what I mean? That has to, has to be a truth.
Jump up, right? It has to be real.
Yeah.
In Bowie's world, anything goes, and
that's right. That's probably why he picked them.
So let's redirect and as we start to close out, Eric, give me 2 or 3 highlights on Ziggy Stardust that really do it for you. I know it might be hard to pick, but go with 3 if you need to.
3?
Yeah,
I'm going to go with Starman.
Mm-hmm.
If I had to be like sort of the hit.
Sure.
But then the 2 tracks that Neil picked, I absolutely love Lady Stardust, and I love the last song. I think,
Suicide.
And it's so short.
Yeah,
it just gets right to the point, doesn't it? It just it ends the album. Yeah.
It's just 3.5 minutes long, and they made the song shorter back then, but they could stick around a lot longer.
Yeah,
they might have been. Well, you know what? I can't say they were going to run out of time on the album, because on side 2, a lot of the songs barely get past 3 minutes, so it wasn't a time thing. So Neil, what outside of recommending, what are 2 or 3 of your favorites on here? What really does it for you on this album?
I love the way the album starts with 5 years. Dum 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 dum. It just has that drum. Mm-hmm. It just starts slow and gets louder. And it's a song that starts the song. He comes in, he sings this wonderful again, an operatic story about the world's ending and all of these, all the fat, skinny people. I never knew I needed so many people. It's just these wonderful lines. And then it ends with that same dump to dump, dump, and it fades out again. It's a perfectly unified little story. It's a story. And it's this great, catchy song. And it pulls you into the world. That's why I say every Bowie album is a different world. And this one is like, this is where you're going. You're going in this strange, glam, post-apocalyptic or apocalyptic world, and just buckle your seatbelts.
Take the ride. For me, I'm going to go with 5 years as well. Star, I like Star. And then not Lady Stardust, but Star. And then I'll go with a hit. I'll pick Ziggy Stardust because it's just so iconic. And
that opening guitar, you know that guitar so well. If you hear that, you know exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that's going to do it for this episode of the 3324 podcast. We thank you for joining us. Neil Laird, thank you so much. Wow. You're a really great guest. Gotta tell you. Gotta hand it to you.
You're worried, right? You invite strangers into your house. You don't know who's going to show up, right?
Yeah, well, we got lucky this time.
That's what we... we've never had a bad guest on our show. It's never been...
I listened to you. You have some good guests on here.
And of course, make sure you check out what Neil is doing, the writing that he's doing, everything that's going on. We're going to drop a link in the show notes to his website. So you can just go check out Neil. Are you on Instagram or Facebook or any of those as well?
I am on Facebook. I have my author Neil Laird author site, and then I'm about to flood the gates with that because of Prime Tom Pompey, which is the next book that comes out in October.
Okay. Yeah, so make sure you're following, checking out his website, and then following on his socials as well. Besides a big Bowie fanatic, he's an author, and he does a lot of different things, and it's always great when we meet people that wear different hats because they're just so interesting because they have so many different experiences that they kind of bring with them. And Neil, we thank you so much for joining us. And we hope to have you on again, maybe with a Bowie album, but maybe not. We'll see what other stuff.
Favorites too. It depends how dark and deep you want to go. I can keep it bubbly or we can go weird.
Maybe we'll do a film.
Great conversation.
Yeah, we could do a film as well.
We could do a film as well.
Oh my God! I mean, I'm a film guy. All kind of.
There you go.
Yeah. So we'll send you a list. So Neil Laird, thank you so much for joining us. And of course, from his comfy couch, Eric is going to be waiting patiently until we meet again on his comfy couch. I'll be on my green hard IKEA chair waiting until we see each other again. New episodes come out every Thursday. Make sure you follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. All the socials. We're there hanging out. Go ahead and interact with us. We answer questions. We love to talk to you.
I got to buy you a couch.
Well, I have a couch.
We need to get you a couch.
I don't broadcast.
He's couch about 12 times now. I don't know if it's couch envy or something. But
you know what? I do need a new couch, but I don't broadcast from my couch. I don't have I have this whole setup thing.
Okay.
But I do go to my couch to relax.
There you go.
So we're not going to set up a GoFundMe for a couch. So don't. We're good, but I like to torture myself with the hard IKEA chair. It keeps me sitting up straight and not. If I'm on a couch, I'll get too comfortable. I might fall asleep if I start broadcasting from the couch. I'll be like passed out. You guys, what happened to him? It's like he's sleeping on camera. So anyway, that's a show for another time. Neil Laird, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Pleasure.
For Absolutely. Neil, for Eric, this has been Dean, and we will catch you on the flip side.
You've been listening to the 3324 podcast with Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 podcast and on Twitter at 3324p to join the conversation.